So now we're back to thank you to Beth and to Stacy and to Molly. And now we are moving on to our next keynote from Deep Intent on unlocking opportunity in the convergence of digital health and digital marketing with our speaker, Chris Paquette, co-founder and CEO of Deep Intent.
How's everybody doing today? It's great to be back in person, huh? It's been interesting to see a bunch of people across the company and the industry who I haven't seen in such a long time. In fact, the first time I was here at DPE, that was 2 years ago, and we just had launched our patient planner, which was, at that time, the first platform to combine clinical data and digital advertising together into a platform, which was very exciting. So I hope with today, I'm here to talk more about what we've done over the last 2 years to bring that vision to a reality. That convergence between digital health and digital media is really what I think is the future of the way that we as an industry will look to unlock new opportunities to better personalize the engagement that we have with both patients, providers, and consumers. So I'm excited to talk to you here today. I think I need to figure out how to get the clicker. Excellent. Great. So just to give you a sense of who I am and just where I kind of come from, over the last 10 years, I've been at the intersection of digital health, been primarily focused at the intersection of AI and digital health data. Actually, starting from back in my undergrad, where I was a researcher on a grant from the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, where I was building different sorts of machine learning to classify disease, looking at genomic data. So have my roots back in the healthcare side for sure. But then for the last 5 years, I've been focusing on building Deep Intent. For those who don't know Deep Intent, we're a healthcare programmatic advertising platform. In our big shtick and how we differentiate is that we have combined clinical data with the way that we do decisioning today for digital advertising. So we work with a lot of people here, and we've truly have come quite a far way from our 30 people sized company from 2019. Now we're 180 globally. So it's been quite a ride over the pandemic. So over the past 5 years, the convergence of digital health data really has taken on new form for us and the products that we've built. And really, when we think about it, there's tremendous opportunity to better personalize the engagement and the experience that we are providing patients and providers. And to unlock that, we're using artificial intelligence that's privacy safe and ultimately real-time data feeds. So I'm excited to talk to you about that today. I hope you guys walk away thinking that this is a passion of mine, because it truly is. But more importantly, we really do have the opportunity to do something better, to really elevate the intelligence of how we do marketing today. And we'll get into more of that as we go along here. So as you can imagine, I kind of shared some of my background and my experience. But for the time before I launched Deep Intent, I was actually working at Memorial Sloan Kettering. So I was a data scientist there, and I was part of a team that was tasked to build out different sorts of tools to improve the quality of service that we were providing patients at that institution. What I quickly realized, though, was that, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the intricacies of that hospital, but it's a massive research institution, and the departments kind of operate in a very feudal way. They all have their own ways and their own data sets, and their own representations of different systems that they use of the patient. So to actually connect all that data together was actually the biggest part of the challenge, to create a unified view of that patient. So it was in that experience that I realized, this must be a problem that's happening across the industry, and we know that is. Different parts of the patient captured in data exist in different systems and different parts of the ecosystem, which I'll talk about further. But a lot of my time was spent on unifying that data. It was only at that point where I was able to unify that data and actually create a representative, holistic view of that patient that we really started to see the value in that data set. And what that really translated to, as we started probing into that data, was that there was immense value at that intersection of all these different data sets. For example, MSK is a big research institution, and there's a lot of science that goes on there. So we had a hypothesis that we could let the data tell us what to research. So one of the examples that we have up here is that, for those who are familiar with metastatic breast cancer, there's a genetic mutation called BRCA1 and 2 that correlates with metastatic breast cancer. And so as we were using AI to mine those patterns and correlations in the data set, we quickly realized that we were finding these types of correlations. And in fact, not just that correlation, but we found thousands of these correlations that previously had not been any sort of research or literature at all to be explored. So that was really kind of the impetus for DeepIntent. I get asked that question a lot about the origin story of where we came from. And it really was that one experience where I realized by connecting all these different data sets, we could have a truly powerful view of the patient and then use AI and artificial intelligence to find new ways to improve that quality of care. So getting back to that question, that seed or that germ of an idea stuck with me during the origin. This is about 6 years ago. And I started asking myself questions like, how can we make this happen? Like, how can we connect the health data across the entire healthcare ecosystem? How could we even fund that? And how do we fundamentally solve that problem of data connectivity? But what I realized quickly, and there's been a lot happening and a lot of other companies focusing on this problem, is that the business interests don't really align, right? It's easier for healthcare data to hoard that data and make value out of that. So I thought to myself, okay, well, having some advertising experience beforehand, what industry has done a really good job at making an economic engine to help unlock the value of massive data sets? So clearly drawing upon my advertising experience, I looked at digital advertising. So if we could unlock the power of connecting all of this data together to drive better personalization, better care, better quality of care, more relevant messaging, and ultimately deliver better outcomes, could we do that by creating this economic engine? And so that's really, to draw a parallel, it's very similar to how Google, right, Google Ads or Facebook ads work and operate today. It just, we're not looking at social or search data, we're looking at health data, and to do that in a privacy-safe way. So on the topic of privacy, clearly not an easy walk in the park to do that. It takes a lot of technology, takes a lot of privacy, really good team to help navigate that ecosystem. I love this view of a healthcare Lumascape. I don't know if raise your hand if you're familiar with Lumascapes. Yeah, so probably about half the crowd. So what this is a representation of the healthcare data ecosystem. And as you can see, it's massive. And actually, if you were to look at summing up all of the market caps for these companies, you would see that this is actually hundreds of billions of dollars of value in this industry. So clearly, at an industry that size, there's tremendous inertia, right? There's tons of hard to get people to change the way that they do business because it's so entrenched. So I looked at that as an opportunity, right? If we really wanted to truly create a patient scale or population scale data set, how would we go about doing that? And that's ultimately what led us to start DeepIntent. So to give you the sense of how much data actually gets created out there, so as I mentioned, that's a couple $100 billion industry. But to give you a sense of the equivalent of how much data that is, that's 1 zettabyte produced annually by the US healthcare system. That's 230 billion iPhones created every year of data. And that number is doubling every year as well, just to give you a sense of the scale. And its total overall share of the total data produced in the world, period, healthcare accounts for 30% of that data, which is a massive amount, and that share is only growing. In fact, healthcare spend is going to hit $15 trillion by 2030. Massive amount of spend. I forget the exact number, but let's just say it's about the size of the US economy, give or take. What's interesting is that this opportunity is not just seen as an opportunity by us, right? I mean, there's other entrepreneurs, there are venture capitalists, there are investors that see this opportunity as well. In the first half of 2021, the amount of investment that went into digital health companies actually surpassed the entirety of 2020, which is insane to think about. I mean, it's just a tremendous amount of money going into that. So there is an explosion of new technologies, new healthcare startups, as I'm sure you guys are all aware. You guys can see it all in the ads that are happening, and as you're reading the trades and the journals. I mean, there is a tremendous number of new companies, and these companies are being well funded. And for my science geeks out there who remember biology, I use the term a Cambrian explosion. Raise your hand if you know what a Cambrian explosion is. Yeah, I didn't think that was going to resonate well, but basically, it is. We're at that big bang part of this ecosystem, and it's going to just continue to multiply and expand exponentially over the next several years. So what does that mean for the future of healthcare marketing? I mean, the opportunity that we see is that opportunity in the convergence of digital health data, and digital media. And so, it's not just that convergence, but it's really just about, the ability to unlock that value for better personalization and better marketing, period. So as I mentioned, 2 years ago when we first launched that planning tool, that vision was the idea of bringing clinical data together with the digital identity data and media exposure data that we had to create a better planning system. And that product had rewarded us as being an industry-leading platform in that period of time. So it's more vision like that, and where we're investing all of our product and all of our roadmap is into that idea, that core thesis, that convergence will only continue, and there will be more data available for us to use in a privacy-safe way to enhance personalization. So on the topic of personalization, I was actually on a call with a big pharma manufacturer, and I actually was asked the question, there's so much data, but so little time, where do I even start, right? And so personalization is a big word, and that code has been cracked, right, by some of the big firms and the big companies that are out there, like Facebook, like Google. I mean, open up your favorite social networking app, and you'll see personalization happen in front of you. So what do they have that we don't? As I say to all my clients, it's really about the data that you're collecting. Foundationally, you need to have that raw log level data sets or that event level data as a foundation. And so to put it another way, data is the oil of personalization. The engine is the tools and the processes that you create to deliver better personalization at scale, right? That's really the key there, is delivering at scale. And so there's obviously lots of tools for that, but more importantly, in the era of social platforms and instant gratification and real-time data, consumer expectations are much higher, right? The idea here is that consumers, we're talking about HCPs and patients, are expecting to have more relevant, more personalized content. So the big question I asked, and actually asked my team to do a little digging before this, we still see that 76% of HCP campaigns are ran off target lists. And so target lists are a snapshot of what has happened in the past. That's 6 months ago at best. We still have target lists that are running from 2 years ago. It's crazy. So, I mean, to think about that lag time and the amount of time and the waste and efficiency, you're marketing to a past that was, not the future that is. And that's ultimately what we're trying to solve here for the future. So that's where programmatic comes in, right? The power of programmatic is data and speed. And for a long time, especially when we first got into the industry, we saw that as, programmatic was suboptimally being used. I mean, again, thinking of that target list example, to have data coming in that's 6 months old, you're not really leveraging programmatic the way it needs to be leveraged. It's all about that speed. So I quickly realized, along with my team, that we had some tools here that we had developed for other use cases that we could then apply to healthcare and for this specific ask. So it's all again about the speed and the data. We realized that by combining some of these tools, we could actually deliver better relevance, which meant better engagement, ultimately better ROI for our clients. So there's 4 key use cases, which I'm happy to kind of go through today, and I'm certainly happy to take questions as well. But these are really the 4 main areas that we see as being the most impactful today. I mean, it's important to realize that we actually have clients today that are using these tools and achieving great results along these kind of 4 main use cases. Those are real-time measurements and optimization, integration of HCP and patient campaigns, creative optimization based on data, and then one of my more favorite ones is the proactive engagement, using different sorts of real-time data feeds to market, again, into the future, not against the past. So one of the things that I first encountered in my time here in the healthcare pharma marketing industry was that measurement is clearly a big issue. For a long time, measurement has been done very retrospectively. There's a massive delay, about six months at worst, right, or even worse, where you have campaigns in market that are reaching physicians and providers, physicians and patients, but you don't know what's working or not. That was a big problem. And so we saw that as an opportunity to ultimately improve. And improve, what I mean by that is that when I started running pharma campaigns, we had clients that were just measuring and cutting, right? So think about that. There's audiences in, let's say, a publisher, right, that are high value. And so, but we had clients that were just cutting out the entire publisher from their media plan. So the question, what we wanted to change, or what we were really focusing on doing, was don't cut the publisher, just find the inventory that's of high value. But those tools didn't exist. And so that's what ultimately led us to led us to DeepIntent Outcomes, which is the first platform of its kind based on real-time, real-world data, ultimately to improve outcomes and understand how do we actually cut the inventory so finely and make that real-time decisioning based on the value of those audiences that we're marketing to. So as you can imagine, outcomes is really at the bleeding edge of this idea of convergence. We are sitting on top of real-time data feeds that represents hundreds of millions of patient lives, and doing that in a privacy-safe way, connecting that back with media exposures, being able to look at daily updates of NRX or new prescription starts or TRX or even audience quality or cost per verified patient reach, all these key metrics that our marketers care about that ultimately lead to better business KPIs, like growing market share. Where for the first time, our platform is the only one of its type where, similar to other, let's say, CPG or e-com platforms, you can go into our DSP and say, hey, I want to optimize towards a cost per TRX. Kind of similar to how a marketer at a shoe store would say, hey, I want to optimize my CPA to get to a $100 CPA because I know that that's where I break even or drive better value. So for the first time, we're actually creating that system, and it's been being used for the last several months with a lot of success. Speaking of that success, I'll give you some examples of that. On our platform, we run patient campaigns, we run provider campaigns. And so on the patient campaign side, using DeepIntent Outcomes, we're seeing an audience quality increase. We're seeing cost per verified patient rates go down. On the provider side, we're seeing higher reach. We're seeing that the effect of the ads, that we're able to drive down the cost per new prescription. We're also seeing lower cost per TRX. So clearly, the key metrics that matter, they're moving in the right direction because we're infusing the way that we're deciding whether or not to serve an ad based on what the data is telling us in a more real-time way. But what's truly exciting, and personally an interesting point for me, I was always very interested in what is the combined effect of the HCP and the patient campaigns together. Like that to me was the holy grail. If we could quantify that effect, then we can prove and actually say, hey, we should actually be reaching these patients and these providers with the same message in the moments leading up to that encounter, right? Moving away from a siloed approach of marketing to patients or marketing to providers, why don't we start thinking about the encounter between those two as being the high-value event that we need to market to? And so that was really what, in my mind, kind of transformed the way we have been thinking about this whole problem set. So with a study commissioned by one of our clients with a respiratory drug, we actually did exactly that. Because we have this data, we're able to connect this data back to the media exposures, ultimately back to claims data, again, in an aggregated, de-identified way. We actually did see that result happen. In the moments, if you were to reach a patient and provider in the days leading up to that encounter, what results is a double-digit percentage increase in new prescription starts. Massive, massive, massive gains. And so what does that tell us? I mean, it tells us that relevance is real and timing is really the most important parts of the marketing campaign. And so it was on that moment of timing that gets into another opportunity. Again, how do we use data to better time our campaigns? And so we have a partnership with a data provider that has eligibility data. For those who are not aware, I mean, it's basically scheduling data where we see a patient population that we're looking to reach, and we're connecting those patients back to scheduling events with their providers. So now for the first time, we can see in advance, weeks out, whether a provider is going to see a high-value patient. You can think of rare disease use cases. I mean, this is the holy grail in a lot of ways of how we look at how to market and better support that patient-provider interaction. So, we obviously have been testing this, and the results so far have been phenomenal, to no surprise, because what we're doing is we're engaging with a more relevant ad and higher personalization. It's really, again, supporting that patient-provider relationship. And that's not just the only type of data set. I mean, we just launched a new product called Audience Marketplace earlier this week, yesterday. And that idea, again, thinking about that convergence of digital health and digital media, we want to help onboard and bring these new data sets in where we can do more innovative type of messaging based on data and speed. But it's also really important to note that personalization is not all about the targeting, right? I think a lot of us agree, and again, I really enjoyed the presentation from the Lilly team before. I mean, the creative is just so powerful, right? So how do we use those insights to better understand what creative is going to resonate? So take two high prescribing providers, right? I mean, clearly they're prescribing a lot of the drug, right? And so let's say you're trying to grow share or to increase the promotional response there. But in reality, those two providers have very different patient populations with very different needs. And those are different patients, and those needs are definitely changing over day to day, right? Every interaction that happens between that provider and patient. And so again, this presents an opportunity for us to look at data to deliver better personalized marketing, that best aligns with the specific need of that patient going to see that physician. And so to give you a sense of the scale, I mean, we sit on, I think it's several million queries per second or opportunities per second that we're evaluating across our platform in the US only. And so every opportunity we see in our platform, we have machine learning that's running against that to say, hey, is this specific creative going to actually cause or have a high propensity to be relevant to that provider and ultimately and get them to write a script. And so those predictions are happening millions, if not billions of times per day, and those are happening in 5 milliseconds or less. And so the type of engineering challenges that we encounter doing that to actually deliver better personalization only can be possible when you have a team and ultimately the technology to support those types of use cases. So very proud of what we've built. So ultimately, and one other topic here, we're not just doing this for the provider side, we're doing this for patients as well. Because what we can see, again, with the data that we have in outcomes, we can see what demographics are best responding and best being impacted and responding to different sorts of promotions. So we can see that different demographic skews in the data set, and you can think about the vaccines, the current marketing for the vaccine responses, we actually saw variations in the responses based on the different social demographics and locations and geos. So it's exciting to see all this data come together and be real in life. And so, to no surprise, right, programmatic is growing. I mean, the overall industry is growing at roughly 7% annually, which, when you compare it to programmatic's growing nearly 7 times that. And it's because that programmatic is so entrenched and really just intrinsically tied to this explosion of health data and different systems and solutions that can bring that health data into these types of use cases that, I really do see that this trend is not going to go away. In fact, this trend is going to continue. So I hope that through this conversation, you guys are bought in, right? The idea here that health data is going to continue to increase the opportunities for us to use data to better personalize and do better targeting and better engage with providers and physicians. This is really, in my opinion, not my opinion, it's what I'm passionate about, but ultimately, in my opinion, this is really what's going to take that quantum leap for our industry going forward. And we're building the tools that help to do that. Ultimately, the acceleration of digital health and the tools and platforms like what we're building here at DeepIntent, they're going to drive better engagement. And we're going to do that in a way that's going to create a new ecosystem of innovation. And ultimately, we're going to help bring more of these data sets together to really deliver better quality of care, better information to patients and providers. Connected health data is going to open up new opportunities to support ultimately that patient-provider interaction. And I really do encourage everybody to think about how are you doing marketing today in silos, right, between HCP and patient mostly. It's really at that intersection and thinking about those high-value events of connecting the two around that encounter and the moment that means most and how we can use the marketing to support those interactions and ultimately, as we've seen, drive better results and outcomes for your business. So, to conclude, real innovation is happening today. It's happening across our platform, but ultimately it's happening in this industry. And that convergence of real-world health data and digital media is driving major use cases of high value for not just us, but the entire healthcare system, period. I mean, we're measurably improving patient lives. We're educating healthcare providers of new treatments. We're helping to educate patients of new clinical trials that may be relevant. But ultimately, you're creating new opportunities for patients and providers to better interact, have more informed conversations, and ultimately drive better results for their quality of care. And it's with that commitment, and obviously with that purpose, that DeepIntent will continue innovating, and myself will be included. We'll continue innovating and pushing those boundaries, and ultimately doing that in a way that's with the patient in mind. And so I encourage you to join us on that mission, and I hope that you got value out of this conversation. So thank you so much.